Women are interested in people and men are interested in things. Women are very different in Bitcoin. I love watching a man who's trying to persuade a woman that Bitcoin is the thing. He goes on and on and on at her, not noticing that her eyes have gone all glassy, and he'll be talking about the technology and the hardware wallets, and she's bored out of her mind. You talk to her about why I need it, why my children need it, why society needs it. Tell a story, tell your story. And then you light the fire in her belly. And once a woman understands the social impact of having a healthy, hard money, I believe that it's going to be the women who are very good at communicating, who are very good at networking, who are going to take this wonderful technology and make it more user-friendly.
Welcome back to Bitcoin for Professionals. Today we have a special guest, Rachel Geyer. I hope I pronounced that right.
That's correct, yes.
Great. How are you, Rachel? Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to spread the word of Bitcoin.
Before we get into Bitcoin, we typically talk a little bit about our guests. So before Bitcoin, we know you're into Bitcoin, I'm into Bitcoin, all of us are into Bitcoin, but I kind of want to know a little bit about you. What did you do before Bitcoin? What was your career like, your interests?
My career, I hate the word career. I was a mother of 4 children, was my main job for a quarter of a century. We moved a lot around the world, mainly due to my husband's career. So he worked for big German companies. And so we've lived in the Middle East, we've lived in Africa, we've lived in China, and we would come back to Germany every time, which is our home base. And around these, my background is education. So I used to be a lecturer at university. Back in the day, that's many, many years ago. I would work at the schools that my children then attended. And we were last living in South Africa, where I'd set up a company for expats living in South Africa. It's a very different life in South Africa. It's the most beautiful country that I've ever been to.
Wow.
Also one of the most dangerous ones I've ever been to. And so you weren't quite free to move around as you wanted to. Mm-hmm. So yes, that was basically what I was doing, but my focus was on bringing up the children, and I found that really interesting. I studied business at university, and I remember at the last day of the course, and the professor was going around the room and asking people, "What do you want to be? Where are you going to go to?" And I said, "I want to be a mother."
Wow!
And everybody laughed, and they said, "Well, why did you go to university for?" I said, "Well, I want to be an educated mother." And this journey now into Bitcoin is really opening my eyes to the low esteem that we hold the most important job in the world. It's the number of times I got asked, "Well, don't you work?" And you go, I've never worked harder in my life. Mm-hmm. My absolute classic was, we were building a house in Germany and I needed to buy a kitchen. Went into the kitchen shop, had to fill out a form, and I never liked the word housewife, so I would always say, "What's your occupation?" "Mother." And the man said to me, "Are you only a mother?" And I said, "Are you only a kitchen seller?"
It's fascinating. Good on you. 4 children. They usually say 1 child is the hardest job in the world, being a mother. 4, I can only imagine. And I mean,
it gets easier. I tell you, the hardest child was the first one, because you're adapting from the role of non-parent to parent. The more you have, the more relaxed you get. The older siblings help with the younger siblings. You don't take it so seriously. And I think I feel sorry for children who've in a family where they've just got 1 or 2 because they've got too much emphasis from the mum and the dad coming onto them. So I think bigger families are healthier families.
Yeah, well, we started that journey. So 2 months from now, and I don't know if it shows, but we're kind of freaking out. It's our first child, and it's a daughter, it's a girl. I'm definitely freaking out about that part, but I'm excited. I've always thought, my first child would be a girl. But yes, I've been asking everyone, is it true? Is it really that hard? And everyone says the same exact thing. The first child is usually the one where, because it's new, it's a dramatic change in your life, but we're very excited, and thank you for giving us a little bit of background. So now, big family, traveled the world. When did you hear about Bitcoin the first time?
From my son.
Really?
So if I did not have had children, I would not now be sitting in this chair. So we were living in Africa 2017.
Okay.
My eldest son, who I can't remember where he was living at the time, probably I think in Spain, and he came home at Christmas to South Africa and said, "Mum, you need to look into Bitcoin." And I was the typical, "Oh, Patrick, I don't have time. I'm very busy." So, but I said, "Look, buy a little bit for my husband and for me for Christmas, and here's some money. Buy something for each of the children, some satoshis. We're not talking much here, for Christmas." And because I could tell that he was very passionate about it. So, okay, you deal with it, Patrick. I haven't got time to look into it. And of course, we bought at the peak in 2017 when it was $17,000, and it promptly fell down to $3,000. And so the children didn't think it was a particularly good Christmas present. I said to Patrick, because at that point I looked at it as an investment, and I said to Patrick, you need to come up with a monthly report on how our investment is doing. Well, we didn't hear very much from Patrick. Apart from he kept posting in the family chat, podcasts which were 2 hours long, books, all the rest of it. And I would be saying, Patrick, nobody's got time to watch a podcast for 2 hours. And then in the end, I had to ban him from the family chat or ban the subject. So I said, okay, listen, we're gonna start a new chat, and it's going to be called Bitcoin Banter. And the family members can choose, do they want to be part of Bitcoin Banter or do they not? And I was interested, but I just didn't have much time. And then roll forward 2020 and the pandemic hit.
Yes.
And our life changed. We had to leave South Africa unexpectedly. My husband lost his job. I lost my job. And I had time to study. And then I started looking at what Patrick had sent me. And I have never read as much as in that year and a half. I read and I read and I read. And then I came across this book called Check Your Financial Privilege by Alex Gladstein.
Yes.
And my head just went, oh my God, it's the money system that's broken. And because we'd lived in so many different countries, and we'd lived lived in China, lived in Africa, and you looked at these countries and thought, particularly Africa, you think, it's a wonderful resource-rich country. Why can't they manage to make anything out of themselves? And then you learn the whole system is rigged against them.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment that I just thought, I have to work for Bitcoin. I have these 4 adult children. I want them to live in a sustainable, healthy society. And I saw how Bitcoin was a healthy money. And then from that moment onwards, it was, well, what can I do? Because my background is in education. So I looked on LinkedIn to see what kind of jobs are going. And the only thing that there was they were looking for people for social media. Well, I hate social media. I had no social media. The only thing I had was Twitter, because my son had said, Mum, you need to get a Twitter account, because if you want to learn about Bitcoin, you're going to learn about it on Twitter. But I applied for this unpaid internship with a mining company at age 53. And I wrote them a covering letter saying, I'm not going to be your normal applicant, but I tell you, I'm going to be brilliant. And the guy rang me up straight away and he said, yeah, of course he did, because he's not paying me. and I said, I'm not doing 6 months, because they wanted 6 months. I said, I can't do 6 months because I've got bills to pay, but I will do 3 months. And I learned as much as I could about Bitcoin mining. I went to as many events as I could. And this dynamic just started off. I was a very unusual look in the Bitcoin space. I remember going to my very first conference, which was in Switzerland, and I walked in and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? It's all these young men with their hats on backwards, their baseball caps. Yeah. And I thought, oh, I'm in the wrong place here. I had a ball. I had the best weekend, of my life. And the funniest thing was they did a quiz. And it really is the developers who go here. It's hardcore. And so I was doing this quiz with the chap who was sitting next to me. And we could really answer every question, because whatever he couldn't answer, I could answer. And what I couldn't answer, he could answer. And we won. And then at the end, they said, okay, this team has won. Would you stand up, please? And we stood up. And the whole room went, it's a woman.
That's amazing. I love that story. Oh my God. You really turned a lot of heads that day, I'm
Yeah.
sure. You know,
Yeah, and you know what it showed me? That if you work together, you can move mountains, because we really fed off each other. He was much more technical than I was, and I was much more socially aware than he was, maybe, or whatever. But whatever it was, we covered the
I
covered the
love that.
question.
I really love that. Even how you know, took that leap of faith and just haggled your way through into the Bitcoin mining industry. Good on you. That's powerful. And I
You know
hope.
what it's
Yeah.
taught me? It's Bitcoin has taught me to say yes to everything, because at that very first conference that I was at, there was quite a well-known German journalist there who's got a German podcast which is very good, Was Bitcoin bringt. And so I went over to him, and I was trying to get the two guys who ran the company, the mining company. I wanted to get a podcast for them. And he turned to me and he said, I want you on my podcast. And I said, oh, no, I'm just the intern. I'm just the intern. I don't know what I'm talking about. And he said, no, I want you on my podcast. And then I thought, well, it's his podcast. And if he thinks I've got something of value to say, hey, I'll go for it. And it was perfect timing, because when they brought out this podcast, it came out the day before a really big event in Innsbruck in Austria. And when I walked into that event, people were coming and go, oh, you're Rachel, you're Rachel, you're Rachel.
Oh
This
wow.
was such a new experience for little me, who'd been completely ignored for the last 25 years. Yeah, so
That's
yeah.
amazing. And you know what you said, I noticed this. A lot of people, so Bitcoin is a bit time consuming for it to click, and it takes some form of event that will kind of liberate you of the distractions of daily life for you to kind of dive in. And COVID was particularly impactful on a lot of people. We saw a huge wave of new Bitcoiners come out of COVID because they had time to think. They were alone, and it's either that time or pain. And some countries, for example, myself, I spent my entire career in finance. I have a master's in finance. I worked with asset managers. Never did I stop and say, there's something wrong with this system, because that's not what they teach you when you're academically trained. They ignore the basic foundations of money. Printing money is just business as usual. That's what you need to grow. But COVID and what happened in Lebanon, our currency hyperinflated, was kind of a wake-up call, and it pushes you to kind of seek answers. But I love your story, and it's really suitable because you have an education background as well. So you're an educator, and mining personally, I think, needs more educators, because it's one of those areas of Bitcoin that I find most people struggle to understand. But before we get into that, you mentioned something, and I want to touch on this. So you said you were the only woman, and people turned around like, oh my God, she's a woman. And you're a co-founder of Les Femmes Orange, so the Orange Women,
Yes.
the translation for that. So I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about that? What you're doing, what your goal, why you founded this?
So after going to about my third event and thinking, where are all the women? Because for me, Bitcoin is just perfect for women. Women, I mean, it's perfect for everybody. It's particularly perfect for women because we're busy. Often we have a job, part-time job, full-time job. We're running the children, we're running the home, we're looking after the parents. And it tends to be, and this is generalizing, but I think to a certain extent you can generalize, women are interested in people and men are interested in things. And I think that there's two things about Bitcoin. One, it's financial, and one, it's a technology. And both of those are something that make women think it's nothing for me. And then you look at all of the Bitcoin conferences that are going on and all the people who are involved in Bitcoin, and you see all these nerdy types, and then you think it's definitely nothing for me. And so I was at one of these, and don't get me wrong, I have always felt extremely welcome at every Bitcoin event. Extremely welcome, and the men that I've met have always been very happy that there's been a woman there. But I think it takes a lot of courage to go through the door. So I was at one event in Germany, and there were about 5 women there, and in total we were 100. And I said to those women, if I was to organize an event for women. Would you think that was good? And would you come? And they all went, oh yeah, that's really good. And so I got together this team of women, yeah, and we put on the first Les Femmes Orange event. We called it that because there's a picture behind me. I don't know if you can see it.
I
There's
see it.
this
Yeah.
beautiful woman coming down the stairs, and there's a bunch of guys at the bottom who represent the central bankers, and they're all holding their money up to her, and she's got her Bitcoin handbag under her arm, and she's called La Femme Orange, the orange woman. And we just really like this is, it's a real woman, it's a feminine woman, the kind of woman that doesn't really exist anymore,
Yeah.
and we need to get back to that. And so we called it that. And we said, okay, we won't say no men because we don't want to we're not trying to split at all. It's not to do with splitting. It's to do with trying to attract as many women as possible. And at the first event we put on, we managed to get 70% women coming.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
it was amazing. And I tell you, it was one of the nicest events I've ever been to. And the men who came to it at the end said, that was wonderful. It was so peaceful. It was so calming. We were singing, we were laughing, we were crying, we were dancing. Women are very different in Bitcoin. I love watching a man who's trying to persuade a woman that Bitcoin is a thing. He goes on and on and on at her, not noticing that her eyes have gone all glassy, and he'll be talking about the technology and the hardware wallets, and she's bored out of her mind. You talk to her about why I need it, why my children need it, why society needs it. Tell a story, tell your story. And then you light the fire in her belly.
Okay.
And once a woman understands the social impact of having a healthy, hard money, I believe women are going to be the ones who will take this wonderful technology, which has been created by men. I'm sorry, Satoshi Nakamoto is a man. If it's a woman, it's a very masculine woman, which there's no, we've all got the feminine and the masculine in us, but men are wonderful. Men are wonderful at focusing. We need men. We need these masculine qualities. And it's got every hallmark of brilliant masculinity, this new technology. And I believe that it's going to be the women who are very good at communicating, who are very good at networking, who are going to take this wonderful technology, make it more user friendly. We need apps that are easier to use. We need, the things that look nicer. I mean, when we do Les Femmes Orange events, it looks beautiful. We have orange serviettes on the table. We drink Aperol Spritz. We're dressed in... Women like the aesthetically pleasing.
Yes.
The men are happy to be sitting in a warehouse.
It takes a woman to make a home, period. Like
Yes.
the way I used to live before I got married, it's exactly what you're describing. I could suffice to sit on the uncomfortable chair with just the TV, no decoration. The wall is it feels like you're walking into a hospital, all white light. And then, my wife, after I got married, she finds details and puts things together and she makes it a home. And it's just very different. And I agree. I think, women should host and organize these events because the men will love them more than when men organize those events, for sure, because there's a nurturing aspect. You
Yes.
guys, I love that. I love everything you're saying.
We cooperate, and I'm not trying to prove to you that I'm more intelligent than you.
Oh,
If
no.
you put 5 Bitcoin men in a room, it's a who's got the longest willy competition. Honestly, I know more than this, I know more than that. If you put a bunch of Bitcoin women in a room, on the whole, I mean, obviously, it's interesting because the early adopters of Bitcoin, the women early adopters, tend to be the more technical ones because that, they were working in that sphere. But on the whole, women will try. If you watch children, little girls will try and cooperate with each other, and they will try to find the common denominator between them and their peers. Little boys will compete with each other. It's just nature, and it's good. This is
I,
not criticism. It's not a criticism. It's good. But what happens is that most of Bitcoin events are organized by men. And then when I talk to them and I say, well, we need to have this on the stage, and they say, but that's boring. And I say, hey, it's boring for you. But I can promise you that the eyes of the women in the room will light up and they will enjoy it. But it hasn't quite got through yet. And so what we say with Les Femmes Sauvages is, okay, I don't need to force my way. And women tend to hold back. So a lot of women get asked to be on podcasts and then they think, well, I've got nothing interesting to say. Whereas men will go on podcasts whether they've got something interesting to say or not.
Yeah, it's an ego thing. Yeah, sure, I can come. I know everything.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're trying to, with Les Femmes Sauvages, we're trying to make this area where women can practice being on the stage in a small area where they feel safe and there's nobody who's going to criticize them when they come off. And it's really working. So, and it's nothing. It's a movement. It's not an association. It's not a company. And we've made it completely decentralized. And it's so wonderful to see how it's growing because every woman is coming in and making something of it. So we have meetups. We originated in Germany, so we've got most meetups in Germany, but we're in Sweden, we're in Norway, we're in Hungary, we're in Bulgaria, we're in the UK, we're in Miami, we're in Tel Aviv, so it's spreading because this is what women do. We network. And now we've just started doing 2 online things in a month. One which is story time in German and one that is how to Bitcoin for beginners in German. But we will now next month or in a couple of months start an English version of that. So
Wow.
anyone from around the world can dial in. It's a live stream so you can ask your questions. And we just have different people telling their story. Because that's what you tell your story.
That would be amazing because my wife is a Bitcoiner, and of course, at that point, I'm more of the tech finance, so I got into it first, and she's now full on Bitcoiner. She's willing to like go all in more than I am, right? Which is kind of ironic because she comes from an entrepreneurial background. I come from a line of bankers. And so for me, it's like, I'm always thinking, should I diversify? And then she's like, no, let's not diversify. Let's just go Bitcoin. So she pushes me in the right direction, if you ask me, but she gives me that nod. But she'd definitely love to attend that session that you're talking about. So we'll definitely be in touch as soon as it's out. We'll
Yeah,
attend.
yeah. And then we do a lot of live events as well, because I think what's missing in today's society, we are dying to interact on a human level again. And I love technology. It's really good. We can be having this podcast now. Nothing can replace
Face to face.
face to face. We're losing the ability to smell each other, touch each other. We're only using a couple of our senses. We hear and we see, but we don't taste, we don't smell, we don't feel. And we're losing this, and humanity is losing this. We're losing the ability to make long-lasting relationships. When you look at young people, it's a problem. I can see it with my children. I can see it with my children's generation. Everybody's sitting on their phone. Everybody is distracted. There's screens going on the whole time. I need to be 5-second burst to get my attention, and if it's not interesting, I'm bored, I change to something else.
Yeah.
We need to slow down. We need to get out into nature. We need to hug a tree. We need to reconnect with another human being, because we're not happy the way that we're.
No, it's really obvious. Everyone feels something is wrong with the world. They just can't point their head. They can't figure out what it is. And it's really maybe just this excessive dopamine hits that you get anytime you want. In the past, it was like you'd go seek experiences because you were bored, and then you do something new and it was like amazing. Now it's like in your face 24/7. Whenever you need it, you just pick up your phone and you get some experience.
Instant gratification. And
Yeah.
if you look at nature, my full-time job is I work for a Bitcoin mining company.
We're gonna get to that. Yeah.
We'll get to that. But so we have an energy lab where we do research into renewable energy in Bitcoin mining, and we open it up once a month, and we have people coming in. And this group came down from Hamburg, and one of the chaps was a regenerative farmer, and I've never heard of the word regenerative farming. And he wasn't a keen Bitcoiner either. His media team had been saying to him, hey, Bitcoin is cool.
Okay.
So he started telling me what regenerative agriculture is. And basically what they say is, if you don't have a healthy soil, you can't have healthy food. And so you've first got to work on the microbiome of the soil. And when we plough, we're absolutely destroying everything that nature creates. You know, you turn the soil upside down, all these organisms that need to be so many centimetres below the soil are suddenly put. And so if you spend the time to nurture the soil, you can make your agriculture that it improves over time. So it's not just staying the same, whereas, you know, we've got this fad about bio, you need to buy organic. Yeah? No, that's dealing with stuff on top of the soil. And when he was explaining this to me, it just went, oh my gosh, that's Bitcoin. Because for me, a society is built on money. And if I don't have a healthy money, I don't have a healthy society.
Okay.
If I don't have a healthy soil, I don't have a healthy food. You know, I can't have healthy food if I'm not treating the soil right.
And without healthy food, you don't have a healthy body. It's like it's the circle of life.
It's a circle of life. And this I've actually fallen madly in love with this farmer, which is my life has changed completely since since I've learned Bitcoin. And he shows me how far removed we are from nature. And he doesn't have a watch. He doesn't deal with minutes and hours. He deals in, you know, is it light, is it dark, is it spring, autumn, winter, what? And you just have this tremendous feel of peace and calm coming from him. And he has had to, over the years, you know, you have to wait for 5 years until you see the fruits of your labor. You know, so he's got this very low time preference. So you know, this kind of agriculture, they're born Bitcoiners, but they just don't know it. They don't know it yet. And it's just made me see, hey, my God, I've got no idea. I wouldn't know how to plant a tomato.
Yeah.
And what do we need? We need healthy food. We need a roof over our heads, and we need healthy relationships.
Yeah. Because across the board, so we had a doctor as a previous guest, Dr. Ahmad Amous, the brother of Saifuddin, actually.
Ah, cool.
So,
Okay.
yes, he's fascinating. I think you and him would get along because the way he describes medicine is how you're describing agriculture. He avoids all prescription. He believes doctors are no longer what the definition of doctor meant 100 years ago. A doctor is a problem solver. They don't just prescribe, I have a headache, here's the pill for the headache. They look at your entire holistic life. They understand some of the habits you have, and then they work with you over a period of time to fix the root problem. In this case, soil. In this case, there's a root problem, whether your diet, your lack of physical exercise. So you fix that, he believes you can solve anything. It just takes time. You just need to be at it all the time consistently. And then
With work, you have to put the work in. My father is an extraordinary person. He was blinded when he was 30. So he was in the Navy and he was serving in Borneo and picked up a virus, and within 1 year he couldn't see. Left the Navy, then he met my mother, and he requalified, he retrained to be a physiotherapist because there weren't many things that a blind people could do, but for the ones who were intelligent, he went back to school, he got some O-levels, he qualified to be a physiotherapist, and he would always say when people come to him, they want an instant fix. But the fix is to do your exercises, to build up your muscles, to build up your skeleton. And my father I've just spent the weekend with my father. He's 90, he'll be 91.
Okay.
And this is modern medicine gone mental. I love my father more than any other person in the world. I wish he would die. And what do? He had a stroke. They put a pacemaker in him. He's on all these ridiculous types of pills, and he was always prided himself that he doesn't take any tablets. But they've now got into this medical rut where the hospital, when he had the stroke, then the doctor said to my mum, oh, he must have this pacemaker otherwise. And so she's a bit scared, and thinks, okay, well, we better do what the doctor says. And I just think, what's he going to die of? He's 90. His time has come, and we give all this medicine that they're sitting around like vegetables. And I mean this with no
I
disrespect,
know.
because
I
I
heard.
love him and I want to remember him. He was the funniest person. He's now blind, deaf, and he's got Alzheimer. Yeah.
That's so sad. I'm
It's
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
it's sad, but it's, we had a wonderful weekend. We were singing, we were dancing, but his time has come, and our society has gone mad that we give all these medicines to where the only people who are profiting are the pharmaceutical industry. It's
Yes.
not doing him any good. I think the Eskimos had it right when the old people would walk out and then go into the cold, and that's dignity.
Yes.
We have no dignity. We have a really weird relationship with death now. Death is part of your life.
It's because people live a life and they're not content. I think it's people just keep holding on because they haven't lived a peaceful, relaxed, or a there's no right or wrong, but there is objective truth of what is healthy for an individual, like not overstressing, not worrying about the small things. Like you said, having a low time preference, like that farmer, he's relaxed. He doesn't care that he's like 1 minute, 10 minutes late. He's not on a clock. He's just, it's sun outside, so I'm going to be outside. Now it's dark. I'm going to go home. So
To his story, he has been completely ruined by the fiat system.
I have no doubt.
Sorry, farmers now, they have become enslaved by the system that we've got. There's been so many subsidies, so they are now farming, even though they know that they're not doing the right thing, but they plant the crops that's going to get them the money. They've become as enslaved as the rest of us. So, I mean, with the work that I'm doing now, we're looking a lot into agriculture because we believe that it will be quite a big thing in the future to integrate Bitcoin mining with
Yes.
agriculture. It's a match made in heaven because they've often got renewable energy, they've got plenty of space, they need the heat for their animals, for their crops, whatever. So it's a match made in heaven. But when we talk to people, 20 years ago, there was a lot of subsidies given for solar and for biogas plants. But the only thing that happens when you get a subsidy is that the price of it goes up, and you've got no incentive to become inventive and to try and work on your productivity and your efficiency. And so now these subsidies are all falling by the wayside because 20 years have gone by, and you've got a bunch of farmers who've got these biogas plants which just are not economically viable because they've never had to be economically viable. And so you can so see wherever the government meddles with, they might mean well,
Of course.
but
I mean,
when you
it's
meddle in one bit, you do not know what the knock-on effect is going to be.
and it's a misallocation of capital because you should let the free market determine where there needs to be a supply of capital, not
Yeah,
force it into the free market. And also, just look at society in general. Everyone, well, the vast majority are struggling, and so they get, like you said, enslaved with a handout. And that handout makes them want more handouts. And then you lose your sense of purpose, and now you expect and you will vote in those who are promising the most handout. And the fundamental problem is that they don't understand where this handout is coming from. It is coming at their expense because what's happening, no wonder they can't afford housing. No wonder they can't afford the life my parents lived, like the baby
yeah,
boomers, because the money is now 100% broken and there's no
yeah,
coming back from that
yeah.
unless we get on a better form of money, like a Bitcoin standard in the future. Even gold would still be better than what we have now, even though gold has its flaws. But that's great. We went on a really big tangent.
And
I
and
want,
I saw something recently which I found really interesting, and this is probably going to get me a lot of hate mail, but I saw something that said that with women having the vote, women tend to err on the side of socialism because we're social creatures. And we all know that socialism doesn't work.
I agree. I
And
lived in a
so
socialist country. It was not fun.
it doesn't work. And so you tend to find often it's the women who are clamoring for this social justice, and we need this, the women are their own worst enemies. If you look at this whole transgender issue, the ones crying loudest to let men in women's spaces and men in women's races are the flipping women.
Mm.
And I thought this was really interesting because we know socialism doesn't work.
Yeah.
And yet we vote again and again and again for socialism. And the whole of the democratic system is, I'm so short-sighted that I will vote for the party who promises me the most.
Exactly.
And it's that is killing me.
And that's the biggest problem in Europe right now, which is extreme socialism. And Canada, sadly, the conservative lost. I don't care about the politics, but he had way more conservative policies that are less socialist. Canada will always be socialist, but the more socialist, the worse people are off. For
Yeah.
example, in Canada, it's reached ridiculous, crazy levels. Now they're assisting in suicide. Like you can
Yeah.
walk to a clinic and they will help you basically. It's ridiculous. And rather than solve the problem, why, which is the economy, I can't afford anything. I'm living off the street. It's freezing here.
Yeah.
And it's a major problem because people
Yeah.
are so used to giving the government that they now start to expect, oh, I'll give the government, but I'll get something in return. But what they fail to see is that the quality that they're getting in return is so bad that it doesn't even cover a fraction of what they've been giving. So they're being robbed actively, in my opinion. But, hopefully we're
You need
seeing
to
more
learn how to.
voices.
Well, what it's taught me, what Bitcoin has taught me is I am responsible for myself. I am responsible for my children. I am responsible for my neighbors. And if everybody would behave in that way, we'd actually be, but it needs to be up to me who I decide with my hard-earned labor, who do I want to support? And I'm a very social person. I will support lots of people if I think that they've hit upon bad times, but that's just a bit of bad luck. I mean, that was my father, a great example with my father. If it weren't for charitable things after when he was blinded, but what these charities did is they didn't give him money, they taught him a new profession.
Yes.
So that he could own his own money. And the trouble with our social system now is that it makes absolute slaves out of you and you're rewarded for bad behavior. I mean, one of the funniest things that this farmer said to me was, every farmer knows you take your best cow in the barn to reproduce. Well, what has this socialism what's happening in our world now? You look around and see which women are pushing prams. It's not your best cows in the barn, I can promise you that, because you are rewarded by you're rewarded by this system.
Yeah.
In a way that, okay, have children, then the state will take, even if you haven't got a husband who can, or a partner who can help bring up this child, the state will look after you. So you're rewarding this bad behavior. Don't go to work, don't worry, we'll pay for you. So there's no incentive to behave in a socially acceptable, socially positive way.
Even so this is more prevalent in the third world or developing countries, but you can clearly see how the people who make bad decisions or that live life in a certain way are rewarded versus those who actually work hard. For example, let's just use Lebanon's case, right? So in Lebanon, a lot of people saved money. They spent their career, their life saving money in Lebanese pound. Overnight, it evaporated. The currency hyperinflated. It used to be a peg. $1 would give you 1,500 Lebanese pound. Overnight, it hit 120,000. So you lost everything. What happened is those that were living with debt, excessive debt, they were able to close off their houses for like $2,000, $5,000 because the dollar was so strong now. And everyone who saved got evaporated. But those who were in debt, I bought a car with debt, I bought a house with debt, I took whatever, a mortgage in debt, I took the cash. They just went, they had someone from outside or they had savings in dollars, give them a few $1,000s and now they're debt free. And the people who saved lost everything because they were they didn't want to be in debt because that's the right way to live, right? The right way for me, at least as a Bitcoiner, is to not live with debt because that's not my money. I'm taking someone else's money or money created from thin air. But that's an extreme situation where you see those who, are doing supposedly the right thing, save, think about your future, save for retirement, take care of your children, live responsibly. Well, they got the short end of the stick.
They're penalised, and we see it. We see it in business as well. I mean, my husband worked for MAN, which is part of VW. Yeah, so they're making buses and lorries. And I mean, think about this. They had their own bank, and so they would make a lorry or a bus, and then a customer would come along, and their own bank would lend the money to the customer, so that then that customer could buy a lorry from. It's and this is happening. A lot of these big companies have got their own banks.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
of course, it looks to the outside like they're selling lots of lorries,
Yeah.
but they're basically giving the customer the money. The money comes back to them out of thin air. We are living at the cost of our children and our children's children with all this, with all this printing. And I mean, obviously, in the future, there's still going to be credit. If I've got a good idea, I'm going to have to find somebody who's prepared to give me their hard-earned satoshis, yeah, because they believe in that I've got an idea that will earn them some money. That will still happen, but it will be, if I do not have the money, it cannot be created out of thin air, and we will think 100 times more carefully about where do I want my hard-earned satoshis to go. Businesses will die much quicker than, I mean, now they can limp on and on and on. We've got
Zombie
so many
companies.
zombie companies which don't deserve to be alive, and that's what happens with all these subsidies. We don't know if we're going in the right. Take energy, which is the area that I'm working in. We don't know what the right solution is because the whole market has been warped with the subsidies coming in. If there had been no government subsidies, where would we be nowadays? Would we be further along? Because I think we would have had the incentives to really work on the energy source which made the most sense. I think Germany is a perfect example for this. We had healthy nuclear power stations that got shut down due to ideology.
Yes, I agree. And we're going to touch on that. But yeah, I want to know all about that. So, because I know you're deep in the mining. So maybe we can kick it off because you're starting to get antsy. You want to talk about that stuff. But tell us, what do you do now? What is your role? And let's kick it off with that.
So my official title is I'm Vice President and Company Spokesperson of TerraHash Space. I like to call myself mother of the company because I believe that's what my role is. Every company, just like every family, needs to have a mother who makes sure that everybody's okay, everybody can perform to their best ability. It's like with my children, my job was to make sure they went off to school with a good night's sleep, with a full belly. That was my role, and I see it a little bit like this in my company as well. And what we're trying to do is bring hash rate to Europe. And we've actually been very successful in this. It's quite exciting.
Amazing.
I'm also the chair of the board of the European Bitcoin Energy Association. We realized early on that, it's the same as with the women. With the women, if you want people to listen to you, you have to speak the same language as the people who are sitting on the other side of the table. So if you want the regulators to listen to the potentials of Bitcoin mining, there's no point coming in and saying taxes are theft and you're all criminals and blah, 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 blah. They're not going to listen. Yeah. You have to come with solid arguments. You have to come with facts and figures. You have to come with pilot projects which are showing how beneficial Bitcoin mining can be. And so we really see a successful country has to be energy sovereign. It has to have abundant, affordable energy. And the Europeans have gone mad, in my opinion, down this route of we need to be consuming less energy.
Yes.
That just is not going to happen. We will be consuming ever more energy. And as you see that we're moving on to AI and moving on to electric cars and moving on to, electrifying everything, we need abundant energy. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. the way the Europe wants to go, it wants to go to renewable energies. Well, I have a massive problem with the renewable energies because I'm trying to put these renewable energies onto a grid that wasn't built for renewable energies. So grids have to be kept stable at 50 hertz at all times. And so your grid operators have got a massive problem. They used to have these nice base load, whether it was nuclear, whether it was gas, whether it was coal, that they could turn up and down depending on how much energy was being used, consumed at the time. Now that I've got these highly volatile energy sources, the trouble with solar is the sun shines when I don't need it, in the middle of the day, which is when you actually need least energy, there's least energy consumption. The wind, I don't know when it's going to blow. And so it's become a very difficult job for grid operators to keep the grid stable. And we recognize or we believe that Bitcoin mining is the missing piece of the puzzle to achieve this energy transition. It will work together with, you will have your renewable energies, you will have your batteries, you will still need to be storing as much energy as you can so that you can push that back to the grid when you don't have sun, when you don't have wind. But there will always be times when you've still got too much that even your batteries can't cope with. That's the point where you can put your miner on. So we're wasting such a lot of energy at the moment in Europe where we're telling the solar farms, the wind farms to curtail because we can't cope with it on the grid. Well, instead of curtailing, you can just push it into the Bitcoin miners. And we had a stand at the Empower, which is the largest renewable energy trade fair in Europe 2 weeks ago. And we actually had a big stand for the first time ever, Bitcoin mining at this energy trade fair. And we were inundated.
Really?
We were inundated. And we saw very early on that energy is going to be the way that Bitcoin comes into Europe. In Europe, we have a recognizable energy problem. And you can talk about it. You can't talk about we have a money problem.
Yes.
Most people don't know. Most people don't understand, and the governments certainly don't want to talk about it. But it's plain as day that we've got an energy problem. I mean, just look what happened with Portugal, look what happened with Spain,
Yes.
Look what has happened to our energy prices. And if you want to stay competitive on a global stage, which the world is global, you cannot be having electricity prices of 30, 40 cents for a kilowatt hour of electricity.
Because you're relying on a third party to supply you with the oil. I think that was made really evident during the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, where I think there were some issues with supply and then prices went through the roof. Yeah, so yeah,
It was the gas pipe that was, and this is why TerraHash exists, because we're actually a daughter company, a subsidiary of this group of companies which has been around for 75 years. It was founded after the Second World War. We are a typical made in Germany company. We make high precision spraying technology, we make cosmetics, and we make car parts. All high precision, everything made in Germany, good solid German engineering. And it was in this time where the CEO of the company, who's running this company in the third generation, the energy prices went through the roof. And he thought, well, how can I stay competitive? And he just learned about Bitcoin. And he thought to himself, you know what? I could put a couple of miners down in the cellar, and we've got a lot of solar on the roof. And when my factory's not working, I can run that through the miners. We take the heat from the miners, we put it into the hot water system. We need constant hot water for our cosmetics production. So we were solving a problem for ourselves. We saw this as a possible solution. And that's how most great companies start. You're solving your own problem. And then we thought, well, if this is something that we can solve for ourselves, there'll be plenty of companies in Germany, in Europe, who are looking for a solution to their energy problem. And thus TerraHash was born. And out of TerraHash it's just so exciting. I mean, we're opening our second mine in Finland. We mine in Finland with 100% CO2 neutral. It's mostly hydro. There's a little bit of nuclear in the mix. And we take the heat and we put it into the local district heating system.
Oh.
And when the grid operator has a problem with the grid because there's, not enough electricity and they can turn us off. And so we're providing these two services first. First, we're providing heat to the district heater. We're providing demand response services to the grid operator. And for us, the Bitcoin is a waste product. In fact, we earn more money if the grid operator turns us off. We can earn more money from being recompensed for being turned off. So it's win, win, win.
That's amazing.
And it's crazy and it's beautiful because there's not one penny of government subsidy that's necessary because this is an economically viable solution for everybody. Everybody's a winner. We had an energy forum in Portugal a couple of weeks ago. And so when we talk about Bitcoin, we only talk about it as an energy solution. We don't need to do the whole ideology of it's sound money. What my story is, I've got a black box. I've got electricity coming in. I've got heat and a digital asset coming out. This digital asset, I can convert straight into euro if I want to. I can convert straight into dollar. If I understand what Bitcoin is, I can leave it in Bitcoin. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I'm solving the problem that this energy producer, consumer, or grid operator has got. So he doesn't need to understand what Bitcoin is. He just needs to know that he's got this tool that he can turn on when he needs it, and it will guzzle as much electricity as you can give it, and he can turn it off. And the beauty, you can produce 1 kilowatt of electricity in, 1 kilowatt of heat coming out. It's wonderful. What's
That's
not to love?
Yeah, that's amazing. I just love that because you're actually solving a societal problem, and you can take out Bitcoin is a hard asset, it's money, all of that. It's permissionless. At this point, they don't care. They have a problem. This is the solution. It works. Period. And then you're done. And over time, you might become a Bitcoiner, sure, but at the end of
You
the day,
will.
that's not the purpose, right? But so you deal with a lot of people, both, I guess, on the political side, individuals in your circle. I'm sure you hear this a lot. Yeah, but Bitcoin is so bad for the environment. It's energy intensive. It's wasted energy usage and stuff like that. How do you respond to that? I'm just curious because you seem to do this day in, day out. So I'm wondering what kind of arguments you would use.
I think this was really interesting for me when I was at this Empower. There was not one single question of this genre from any of the energy companies
Wow.
because they understand that using energy is not a bad thing. If you want to be a prosperous nation, you have to use energy. The question is, where does the energy come from? So I think that we've managed to change the narrative. And I think that our company has been quite instrumental in this because we've been around for 75 years, because we are a trusted, the local politicians will go, well, I know the Kliger Group, they've been there and paying their taxes and having these good products for so many years. Why are they looking into Bitcoin mining? I thought this was something dirty, criminals, whatever. And so they can come along and they can talk to very normal people. And I'm obviously, well, I don't look like your typical criminal, and so, and you start a new narrative. So on our European Bitcoin Energy Association, we have a website where we have listed all the peer-reviewed studies. Now, even the University of Cambridge has recently brought out a study which shows that without any regulations required whatsoever, Bitcoin mining of its own volition is becoming more and more renewable energy renewable energy as its source.
Because it's
Why?
cheaper. It's
Cheaper. And because I'm competing on this global market, the only thing I'm interested in as a miner is I need cheap electricity. What electricity is cheap? It is stranded surplus energy. Where do I get stranded and surplus energy? I get it from renewable energy. So you don't need to regulate anything. It's just happening of its own volition.
Because it just makes sense. It's common
It just
sense for
makes
a miner
sense.
from an economics point of view.
Having said which, I was sitting in a meeting last week with the European Commission. So they have commissioned a study to look at the energy consumption of the different cryptocurrencies. It was a complete and utter joke.
Yeah.
And you could just, I mean, it was embarrassing, to be honest, because I'd had an interview with them previously as chair of the board. I got in touch with them and I'd said, listen, if you want some information, we're doing research, blah, blah, blah. So I had an interview with them and I was telling them about the positives and the benefits of and then when they came to put their study together, there was not one word of this whatsoever. So we're sitting in this webinar and the guy is going on and on. I wish I could show you. I took photos of it, which I probably wasn't allowed to do. But you can imagine you had Bitcoin, and then you had Ethereum, Ripple, and DAO. Bitcoin, red, 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 red. Ripple, green, 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 green. So you ask yourself, who's paying for this? Who's paying for this study?
Yeah.
And so I asked in this meeting, and this is something I'm learning, which I would never have done before Bitcoin. I asked, please let me speak. And so they did give me the microphone. And so then I started talking about what we're doing in Europe with grid stabilization, and the guy said, but I don't understand that. And I said, well, we're very happy to teach you about it because you really need to understand what you're regulating before you regulate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, this is what's so crazy. I know politicians have got a very busy life, and I know it took me a year and a half to understand Bitcoin. I don't blame anyone for not understanding Bitcoin mining. You have to take what you thought you knew, put it aside, and come with a completely fresh brain and go, okay, let's start this again. It's a big thing. It's a big thing.
It needs humbleness, and sadly, a lot of politicians are not humble people because the act of becoming a politician requires a bit of, arrogance, a bit of, a different breed of individuals.
I know more than you. I know what's better for you for your life.
Exactly.
But the incredible thing they were still talking about a per transaction. So
That's
energy
so
consumption per transaction. And you think, you're embarrassing yourself. Please, you're embarrassing yourself. If you're still harping on about that, and whether it's KPMG, whether it's University of Cambridge, there's hundreds of these studies that are showing, and this was all put in the world by this one bank, the Alex de Vries, who was the banker from the Dutch bank, the Dutch central banker. But you know what? What we believe with IBEA is the people that we need to educate are the energy companies.
Yes.
Because once the energy companies understand it, they are the ones who are going to do the lobby work in Brussels. Because they've got the power behind them, they've got the money behind them. And this is what you can see going on in Brussels. All of the other cryptocurrencies, they're lobbying because they're companies, because they're foundations. So they've got loads of money, and so they've got a seat at the table in Brussels. Nobody's got a seat at the table. No Bitcoin has got a seat at the table because Bitcoin's not a company, Bitcoin's not a foundation, which is what we're trying to be with IBEA, just to give Bitcoin a bit of a voice. I don't want to be arrogant in this because I have no idea what kind of effect we'll have, but at least we can say we tried, and at least the European Commission cannot say now they did not know.
Yes.
Because they know, it's in the transcript, they know that there are a lot of potential benefits of Bitcoin mining. And it's my belief that, and we know this to be true, so China tried to ban Bitcoin mining, At the time there was about 30% of global mining was happening in China. China banned it. Did Bitcoin care? No. Within 2 weeks, the hash rate was up to where it was previously. Today, there's still 20% of the world's Bitcoin mining happening in China, even though it's forbidden. Governments cannot ban it. They can ban it, but they're not going to stop Bitcoin. They're just going to stop themselves, and they're going to stop their own citizens. And they're going, so if they do not understand what they're regulating on, it's to the detriment of their own citizens, their own country, their own region. And so this is, again, our role with IBEA is educate, educate, educate.
And that's a good segue, Rachel. So we had Bob Burnett on our show.
Love him.
Great guy. I love Bob. And he's everywhere as well. So he said nation states must mine Bitcoin to stay sovereign. Do you agree with that statement? And what's your take on that?
I have read Jason Lowery. I've got my copy of Soft War here. if I we were doing a workshop last week for one of the largest steel manufacturers in Europe. They get it.
Okay.
And every country needs to be, we're putting ourselves in a very vulnerable position because where are all the ASICs being built? They're being built in China. This is not clever. And so, I mean, there are now, I know Brains has been doing work on it. There's Adam Back's Blockstream.
Yeah.
Blockstream, people are working on making ASICs in other countries. This is where we need to, we've been lazy. We've outsourced all of our manufacturing over to China without realizing what we're giving up. You never understand what you've lost until you've lost it.
It's the same problem with the US and the chips in Taiwan.
100%.
And look at what's happening now. They're trying to bring back onshore everything because it's a matter of national security. So this would kind of fall in the same basket. Yeah, but so you agree, I guess. That's your answer.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to Bob Burnett. I can't remember. I've met him a couple of times. I think he's a wonderful person, and he was talking that as a Bitcoiner, you should really be doing some mining because there will come a time when if you want your transaction to be added to a template or added to a block, you need to have access to your own mining facility because there will come a time when the space in the block is so limited, and then you will have countries who are mining in big style saying, okay, we're gonna take our transactions and we're not going to take other people's transactions. I mean, we have no idea where this is going.
Yes.
We have never, ever had a technology like it. In my ideological self, I hope that it leads to getting away with all country borders. I don't think, that's what, but I'm an ideologist and I'm happy to say, it's probably not going to happen, or that's definitely not going to happen in my lifetime. I think that you need to be, as a family, you need to be self-sustainable. As a city, you need to be self-sustainable. As a country, you need to be self-sustainable. So yes, it just makes perfect sense that if this is the money of the world, and it will be the money of the world, that's just a matter of time. Obviously, money always flows to the hardest asset, Bitcoin. So that's just a matter of time. Then every country needs to make sure that they've got a foot at the table, that they can get their transactions into the blockchain. How do you get your transactions into the blockchain? You mine.
Yeah. And it's your hedge against any potential threat to your ability to trade, because you can always transact if you have the mining infrastructure in place. It just also provides more comfort as, a country having that. We're at the mark.
Isn't this beautiful? Yeah. Because the more every country mines Bitcoin, the stronger the network. So whether it's your country mining it, it makes my Bitcoin safer.
100%.
If it's my country mining it, it makes your Bitcoin safer. I love it.
Yeah, it's whether you want it or not, we're working together globally.
We have to cooperate. We are cooperating, not because we want to, but because if you do not, this was the one thing that really flashed me at the beginning: rules without rulers.
Yes.
And this is what I learned as a mother. So when you're bringing up children, you need to have as few rules as possible. And the rules that you give your children, you have to follow yourself. Because and I'm guilty of this, so if I would sit there and stuff my face with a packet of crisps, and then I would tell my children, no, you can't have crisps, they're unhealthy, they're not going to listen to me, they're going to watch what I do. Yeah. So you want to have very few rules. You need to follow the rules yourself, and then they'll be taken seriously. And this is Bitcoin. I have to play by the rules. If I don't play by the rules, I will be penalized. 100%. But there's nobody saying you're right, you're wrong. It's the protocol. It's all written in the protocol.
And it's a first of its kind type of system that we're not used to that. And that's extremely hard. When I got my parents into Bitcoin, so my dad was an ex-banker, he would constantly ask, didn't matter, we speak for an hour, then he'd be like, yeah, but who controls it? Like, who decides? And I'm like, no one. That's the beauty of it.
We all do.
And he had a hard time because centralization is so ingrained. It's really a paradigm shift. But Rachel, we're at the mark almost. I got 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
and these are not Bitcoin related, or they could be, I don't know. What's one question you wish people ask you more often, but don't?
What brings you joy?
Ah, nice. What brings you joy?
People.
Nice. I like that. That's a nice answer. Second question. What's a question you love asking other Bitcoiners?
What brings you joy?
Wow, I love that. It's
You
universal.
know, often the first question that people ask you is, what do you do? You know, we define ourselves by our work.
It's sad.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It's fine if your work is your ikigai, you know, and my work has always been my ikigai because bringing up my children was my ikigai. I just couldn't earn any money with it. And now I you know, but we define ourselves on how much money do we make. And we don't define ourselves on our deeds. So we define ourselves on our dollars, but not on our deeds. And I will respect you for what you do, you know, not how much money you've got on your bank account, because that's luck,
It is.
largely luck. And I know this because we've lived all around the world. I know how privileged I am because just because of where I was born. It's
That's
not
true.
because I'm as anything, but I'm just flipping lucky. I live with Mohammed. Mohammed is a refugee from Senegal, Gambia. Yeah, that guy is worth 10 of me. I tell you, he has been through hell and back and stood up and stood up and stood up. I couldn't do that. My children can't do that. We're soft. He's got nothing on his bank account. But if I'm in a crisis, I'll tell you who I want to have on my side. I want Mohammed. He'll get me through.
The survivor, right? The survivor. You want the
Right?
survivor on your side, 100%. I love that. I love those two answers. Thank you so much, Rachel. Rachel, before we end it off, where can people find you, learn more about you, learn more about TerraHash, learn about Les Femmes Orange? How can people
So
find
we
you?
have websites for all of those, and I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes. I do hate social media because I think that it's a necessary evil. It's very good for work. So my LinkedIn, it has got a lot of connections. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on X, but I don't do any. I'm on Noster. I'd like to say I did more on Noster. That's my next go-to. But I think we spend far too much on social media and it turns us into worse people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's like a drug, and we need to get it out of our system. I try my best, but again, like you said, work kind of requires it. But you know,
And we're
and
addicted.
yeah,
We're addicted.
it is. It's tough. It's tough. But okay, we'll make sure to put everything in the show notes. Rachel, this was a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Thank you for having me here.